Welcome to A More Perfect Union. And once again, we are talking about the larger issues of the day. With me, of course, our eminent host, Dr. Michael Walker-Jones. How are you doing this morning?
I am doing fantastic this morning, sir.
And I'm feeling entirely adequate, I might just point.
Yeah? Okay. Today we're going to be discussing part 2 of DEI.
The three infamous initials.
Yes. But today we have a person as a guest that we will get to in just short order, who has lived with not to say a major kind of movement that he has been able to help his state and the universities and public entities in his state. Again, we'll reveal that a little later. So that's the tease for our folks to stick with us. But before we move to that, it's my understanding that you've had some personal experience in terms of looking at here in Massachusetts an activity that you attended.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
That you came away with some sort of intriguing thoughts.
Well, it was surprising. July 4th is a biggie, of course, here in Franklin. Mm-hmm. Everybody celebrates it big time. And this year I wasn't able to be here for the usual, multi-day festivities. I was, what can we say, summering on the vineyard, is I think the phrase they use. Actually, I was only there for a couple of days. My son, his wife, et cetera, are in Edgartown. And so we popped down there to see them for the holiday. And of course, Martha's Vineyard, what can you say about it? There's a lot of very high-end living, a lot of old school. That said, one of the things that they said that I could not miss was the 4th of July parade.
Ah.
So, okay, we were going to walk down the street, literally 4 blocks, to take in the 4th of July parade in Edgartown. So I wrote about it after the fact. Every week, as you know, I do what I call a deck page for our program guide on Franklin TV. And on this particular week, I recounted what I experienced when I was looking at the parade.
Well, please share.
So, I have it right here. I now read. Where is America? I miss it. I spent July 4th with relatives on Martha's Vineyard, Edgartown. Thus, I missed the excellent festivities in Franklin. We do know how to make it happen, don't we? It's fascinating how a change of venue can offer a change in perspective. I'm standing in a crowd of citizens on Main Street in Edgartown. The collective mood is convivial, anticipatory, enthusiastic. We're all just waiting for the parade to start. Earlier, I was told it was an event not to be missed, so, yeah, sure, yeah, I guess I'll go. As I watched the parade glide by, the world changed. It went back to the way it used to be. The good parts, the emotionally pristine parts. There was an antique fire engine with a manual siren that the fireman at the shotgun seat cranked up for enhanced effect, a wagging Dalmatian on top, other firemen walking alongside, tossing candies and beads to scrambling kiddies in the crowd. It was a slow-motion throwback moment, a Rockwell painting come to life. There were tykes on Dad's shoulders, waving little flags. There were home brew floats with sharks. After all, it was the 50th anniversary of Jaws, and the place became Amity Island once again. Amity, the general meaning. Friendship and harmony. Amity is a formal or literary term for friendship, mutual understanding, and a peaceful relationship. It often implies a spirit of goodwill and positive coexistence, even among differences. And then a group of marchers held a large banner, and it read, DEI lives here. I felt an oddly visceral sensation of safety. In that moment, nothing could hurt me. I'm comfortable. I'm white. I'm privileged. And yet somehow I felt better, safer. The entire crowd began to cheer wildly. A collective yes. Several floats, banners, handheld signs throughout the parade brandished various DEI messages, each accompanied by more unabashed, spirited cheering, happiness, amity. I witnessed, indeed I experienced, the America that I believe we all want. How do we get it back?
Very, very interesting. It seems that this disconnect that I have observed between our people and our institutions, in particular our political institutions.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me, Peter, that part of getting where you and I may want to be is how do we reestablish those connections to where people have, I guess, a belief and a trust in our institutions, but at the same time see that there is a place for us still to grow and to grow together.
Yeah, it's become a complex, call it, set of questions and circumstances, and I want to rewind here a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You may recall, and we're still seeing the vestiges of it, that there was, of course, a Me Too movement. Going back 5 years, a decade, and the Me Too movement really kind of took hold in terms of confronting past slings, arrows, slights, particularly against women. Another layer of equality for women
Mm-hmm.
in terms of their social and sexual status, and so it became, as I perceive it, angrier and angrier.
Yes.
And certainly we know that there are people who are absolutely deserving of whatever ire came their way, both in the courts and in the court of public opinion. There were horror stories. Along the way, there were also sidebar, collateral damage, I'll call it. And the collateral damage was a way of taking otherwise good people who contributed to society in many ways,
Mm-hmm.
politicians, authors, and so forth, who maybe 20, 30 years ago had some type of a gag joke or whatever, or some minor incident where now it was being called out in the angry elements of the Me Too movement, and their careers suddenly just vanished.
Yes.
Gone.
Right.
Like that. It's over.
Right.
There was no hearing, there was no consideration. They were just automatically guilty by accusation. And I thought it got a little extreme in a couple of cases. So what that did was created this counter movement we came to know as woke.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone suddenly had to prove that they were woke. And there was this tension about wokeness, leaning into it, I think, for a lot of people, that produced a level of arrogance where, while trying to prove that you're woke and take a strong position in that respect, suddenly you're contrasting yourself against people that might not be considered woke or didn't even want to be considered as woke.
Mm-hmm.
They just wanted to be considered as, well, I'm a good guy and I already know it, and why are we doing something like this when I know I've been good to people through my life,
Right.
but
Right.
I don't particularly feel woke. So what you have are these two extremes, and these extremes of social position sort of created this energy of arrogance that was perceived. There's the key word, people, perceived. Because when someone perceives something, consider that it is in their mind real.
Yes. And I recall personally at the beginning of the Tea Party
Tea Party,
movement,
yeah.
I was in Louisiana.
Yep.
I was the executive director of the Louisiana Association of Educators, which, by all definitions, is the teacher union, the teacher affiliate of the National Education Association in Louisiana. And we were up against, at that particular point in time, a philosophy that teachers are and teachers should be held accountable for everything that is wrong in our schools.
Right.
To the point where if you are a teacher, you need to be evaluated more. You needed to have your raises tied to merit. And merit in this case is defined as how many of your students are passing tests.
Right.
Your ability to have, and let's be clear about this, and we've tried to be clear on this program about this, your tenure, which for K-12 teachers is nothing more but a right to due process. It is not a property right to a job.
Right.
And if you look at some of our previous episodes of this program, you can get an even deeper definition of that. And we found ourselves, which now I'm very surprised at, we found ourselves actually in line with some of the philosophies, thoughts, and actions of the Tea Party in Louisiana.
Interesting.
We had a lot of common interest. That is more of the interest of the people. And I happened to encounter a gentleman who at the time was the executive director of actually he was the commissioner of higher education for the state of Louisiana. A very learned and very, very astute, and I will say probably one of the most brilliant people that I have encountered in my career. His name was Dr. Jim Purcell. And Dr. Purcell, as the commissioner of higher ed in the state of Louisiana, had authority, he and his board, over all of the public universities in Louisiana. Since that time, he has also been the commissioner of higher ed for the state of Rhode Island, and is currently the commissioner, the executive director, as he's called in Alabama, the executive director of the Commission on Higher Education in the state of Alabama. And Dr. Purcell, I'd like to, again, bring him into the conversation, and Dr. Purcell joins us now. Good day, sir.
Hey, good day to you guys. It's great to be here. Good to talk about good US of A kind of things.
And it's wonderful to have you, my old friend. And for our audience here in Franklin, I want to, again, welcome you from your office in Montgomery, Alabama. And Jim, give us a little background in terms of, I know Alabama has been working under a piece of DEI legislation since, for about 3 years now. Is that correct?
Yes, about 3 years ago, there was a big push. Everybody sort of wanted to be basically Florida. And what we tried to do is convince them that DeSantis light is probably a better approach. So we basically had this template of what what the legislation wanted us to look like, which was the Florida legislation, which was very restrictive. And I had a good opportunity to, behind the scenes, have real good conversations with those that were supporting it. The big thing was we talked about, when would you rather us have the conversation that we all need to have in America? Do we want to have it when they're on the streets? Or do you think it'll be better if we could have it while they're on a college campus or in a classroom? And basically both parties agreed we need to actually have these conversations. So one of the first things that they agreed to do was to exempt conversations that happen in class so that there actually could be a dialogue on the social issues of the day and the things that matter. Because both of us agreed that the social issues of the day were probably the best learning tool for civic engagement as anything. And then there became this discussion about, well, we have a lot of efforts in our state to help build our human capital. We had not as many African American men, especially, that were in teaching professions. So we had scholarships that were targeted toward these folks. And the legislation that DeSantis had brought forward was that we should not have any of those type of scholarships. And we both agreed that, yeah, it's important for people to have role models and people to have access to the education system in a way where they could benefit and learn in a better way. So they agreed that we could have targeted scholarships. And even since then, we've actually added additional scholarships for Native Americans. Of course, in Alabama, we called it Indian scholarships, but that's a different conversation about semantics. But yes, I think we've made a big difference in actually making the conversation more about what our commonalities are that we do value to make a better country.
Right.
We just come from different ways.
Jim, Dr. Purcell, it seems to me that the detail and the nuances in terms of what Alabama went through are not out in the media. Why hasn't your story, I guess, been part of the national narrative, Dr. Purcell?
Well, first of all, I want to keep my job, so I don't necessarily make public declarations like that. I'm all about good policy, and really having candid conversations one-on-one. Sometimes behind the scenes, I'm not out there to do the soundbite type of thing. So I think that's some of it.
Right.
I think the other thing is, we sort of recognize that right now some people want to have the pulpit, and they are electable or get support because of the incendiary word. So, basically this bill keeps the first top of the bill basically looks like a DeSantis written document. But the second half is a whole section on exceptions or exemptions from the paragraphs that were above. So I think that's one of the things you can do. You can have people declare whatever their stance is, but at the same time, it's the implementation and it's the clarity and the fidelity of implementation that I think makes a difference. And I think in this case, basically higher ed was exempted from a lot of those exceptions, and that has moved forward. So like this year, they had a requirement where they wanted to have, prayer in all our schools and everything. And the 10 commandments in all the classrooms. And they were going to do that for higher ed. They were going to have in every building, the 10 commandments would be in a dominant place in every building. And we actually got that was eliminated. They certainly kept it in the K through 12 side, but I think it was important that they recognize that at a college and university that that really didn't make a whole lot of sense. And, we were able to not have higher ed included. So I think that's the important thing is there are places where we can all end up getting to a common place, but it does require conversations that allow people to maybe back down a little bit without it being, a declaration of loss in public.
And I guess there is there's a favorite phrase that I like to use, which is saving face. It comes from, I think, the Japanese culture, and it is important. And I agree with you, Dr. Purcell, that many of the conversations that we need to have are not necessarily structured in a way, nor should they be, where they should be public. I mean, these need to be almost neighbor to neighbor, small group kinds of conversations.
I think I want to point out something also that it's good to talk about the fact that what we have is a disconnect at the national level. And the disconnect at the national level is policies being implemented, promoted, indeed enforced, don't align with the surveys that come back from the populace about how people really feel.
Right.
about the issues. There's the sense that things have gone too far on several fronts. We're seeing institutions being challenged in ways that are oppressive, even all the way down to museums now. But what's interesting, because what you said was having these small groups, intimate conversations, call it neighbor to neighbor, friend to friend, whatever. I think that if you were to drill down into that, you would find that that is happening quietly among people who are familiar with each other, and that their sentiments as human beings amongst friends of every persuasion is that they're welcoming. They're
Yes.
supportive of people regardless of who they are.
Yes.
So in that sense, without obviating it as some aspect of DEI, there is this element of, well, let's get back to the word in what I wrote, amity. We don't have to agree with everybody to like and respect everybody. And I think that there's an element of that in society that shows up in the surveys and runs directly counter to what the administration is claiming
Right.
that they're trying to do.
Right.
And so we have a couple of dichotomies here. One dichotomy is we have this anti-woke DEI movement, and at the same time, there is this equally strong movement regarding fighting anti-Semitism. Because, well, guess what? If you're fighting anti-Semitism, you're moving in the direction of one of the elements of DEI, which is, welcoming, embracing, and supporting a Jewish population, such as they are.
Right. Right.
And so we have these two things that appear to be, logically at loggerheads.
It seems to me, too, that, again, having worked with Dr. Purcell and having been in Montgomery, Alabama, which in some ways, I know that Montgomery in some ways promotes itself as the nexus of both the civil rights movement as well as the nexus of slavery. Okay. And as you sort of travel around the environment of Montgomery, you see those two things, not just the history, but also the current sort of wave of both rejoicing with the museums that are there, that are absolutely wonderful.
Absolutely. That's the celebration of the journey.
Yes.
The fact that we're not static, the fact that we're not stuck back there, but this is the toward a more perfect union journey.
Yes. Yes.
Writ large.
And I know that there are a number of people of all types, men, women, white, black, Native Americans, who absolutely, I think, are very proud, not only of Montgomery, but there are other places in Alabama too that have a history of both what I would call pain and suffering, as well as joy and
Jubilee.
And jubilee. Yes, yes, that wonderful word that we came up with. And it seems to me too that higher ed, which has an extremely important role in this country to play, Dr. Purcell, it seems to me then that you have hit upon something that I wish we could take it and bottle it and, and sort of put it in other places. Maybe you can tell us more about, for example, their workforce, the work that you're doing in workforce development, which is not narrow, but extremely broad, is something I think that, again, sort of distinguishes Alabama from other places. Give us a little bit more in terms of some of the work that higher ed, your office, and the institutions there are doing in that regard.
Well, some of it is actually related to this political conversation. We have several initiatives. One of them is called Retain Alabama, which is actually to retain our younger population to work on our economy. And one of the first things we did is we asked the students, why do you stay or not stay in Alabama? And the people that left because of our politics. So here we have this people that we're educating with, the best of our education offerings, and a lot of them were leaving fairly early. And that was a sort of a wake-up call. So all of us understood that sometimes our rhetoric did not really support what we really wanted to have to build here. The second one was Recall Alabama, which was to try to get people that left the state to come back and let them know of the opportunities that are there. And then finally is to re-engage, which is to have those students that perhaps didn't finish and get them back into college and target them for job opportunities specific to high paying in the state, and giving them the support when they need it. Basically helping people with the American dream when they need the help the most. I would want to say, Michael, at this point, there is a national movement right now. There's a multi-state collaborative called, is for civic learning and democracy engagement. And it is actually run by Richard Freeland, who was the CEO in Massachusetts and former president of Northeastern. And so he's got a lot of the national higher ed people working together and encouraging there to actually be more civics type education in college, up to 6 or 9 hours of coursework that's specific to allowing those conversations to happen. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you an example in Alabama. The University of Alabama was criticized recently because they have a women's studies course that is like one of the most popular courses, and everybody was not everybody, but a lot of people were not happy with the fact that it was one of their most popular courses. But the reason it was popular is because it was actually a place where real conversations about all the issues that we see in the news can be discussed. And the key here was they wanted to make sure that it was not required, and it wasn't. It was a course that was optional, but because of the fact that it did offer an environment for civic learning and democracy engagement, it became popular. Now, I have not joined this collaborative from the state of Alabama because they do say the word DEI in a few places, but they do allow us to be like sub-affiliates or something that doesn't act like I joined the club.
Right.
Because I do want to be in the room to have a conversation about how best to do that, not only in our state, but in other places.
And it seems to me, too, that before one takes policy to its extreme, it's important to talk to those people who are going to be impacted by that policy, or the result of the policy. Who is it that we're trying to influence? I'd also like you to sort of tell us, you said SHEO. What is a SHEO?
Yeah. So the SHEO is it's the State Higher Education Executive Officer. So it's whoever is in that state's in charge of coordinating the community college and university governance. They do their budgets, they do financial aid, all policy, and they sort of guide the state toward how to address workforce issues and things of that nature. I will say that every state has their own different approach. Some of them are, top down, others bottom up. And then in Alabama, we call it coordinating board light because it's all done by charisma. I mean, we actually have no authority other than documents. It's like Peter writes great words and shares them with the public. That's sort of what we do, is we have to communicate it and try to just encourage people to toward your particular vision.
And having worked with Jim in Rhode Island, the distinction I think that you're making here, that in some states, for example, in Rhode Island, the higher ed board has control over those institutions to the point where they can give them directives. Mm-hmm. And I think what you're describing then is in Alabama, you don't have control, but you do have some, what I could say would be influence, but that's the extent of it. You cannot force any of the would that be an accurate kind of description of?
Yeah, and I think in the South, it's generally that a law is sort of just general guidance. they don't adhere to it as strictly, perhaps in some places.
Right.
The written word, they would say the written word is complex. What we see is the legislative intent does not really come and appear itself on the document itself. So we need you as a bureaucrat to delineate and decipher particularly what our heart intent was when we wrote the bill.
Yeah.
And it is a tough place to administer government because, as you know, some stuff you can protect yourself in court, and other stuff you can protect yourself in politics. And sometimes it's a different approach on both sides.
And also, I'd like to point out to our neighbors here in Franklin, Dr. Purcell has the very distinct honor of having been by all of the SHEOs, the state executive officers of higher ed in the country. He was the SHEO of the year, national SHEO of the year.
Good on you.
Yeah, congratulations, sir.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I also think you have the distinction of probably being at this point, aren't you one of the most senior higher ed executives in the country, which is actually one of those blessings in and of itself, which means that he's been able to survive.
Right. Also, Jim, you said something earlier that I didn't want to lose as you were talking. You used the word charisma. A fascinating word, one of my favorites, in that it comes from the Greek, charis, which means grace.
Ah.
And what that means is you are gracing other people with your engagement and engaging them. And in fact, there's one politician who really understood this, really old school guy, Tip O'Neill.
Oh, yes.
And Tip used to say, people like to be asked, people like to be thanked. And what he was doing, he'd put on his ears and he'd give them his undivided attention. They could then talk to him and they'd walk away feeling like, that was a meaningful opportunity and a discussion. And so what you were saying, both in terms of exercising influence and engaging people so that way they feel like they have traction, there's the operative. Having that traction gives you the opportunity for consensus building, gives you the opportunity to do a lot of good things that are otherwise not that easily attainable. And I'm sure you would agree with me that it's a patient process. It's not something that you just switch on.
Right. Yeah.
And also
You
to
have
your
to build
point,
trust. You're right. I mean, the relationship first.
yep.
And it is your, one of the problems I had when I went to Rhode Island. Of course, they have great reporters up there, and at some point I was in Arkansas, and they had the whole immigration, people paying tuition or not. And our governor asked me to go to do the hearing, and I said, I believe in the rule of law and that we should not do anything the federal government doesn't do. Now, he was a Democrat, but that was back when Democrats were conservatives. And I was asked to do whatever the administration's policy was. Well, of course, that became to haunt me 9 years later when I became commissioner in Rhode Island, which is, much more of a communist state than what I experienced prior. Not to be incendiary at all here.
Oh, no, not at all, Jim.
No.
Not at all. Under a previous administration there, not the current administration, but it also seems to me too that you've had now one of the things too that I guess you bring to your position in Alabama that you also bring to your work, which is this plethora of experiences. You were in Oklahoma, is that correct, at one point? Arkansas, Louisiana, Rhode Island, and now Alabama. But you're born and raised in Alabama. And it seems to me, too, that, again, having sort of observed not only your work, but also some of the institutions in Alabama. Alabama has, if I'm correct, the largest number of HBCUs in the country. Largest, that's between the community colleges and the higher ed institutions. And so how does that sort of work? And some of those higher ed institutions, the HBCUs, our state institutions as well. Give us a little bit of how all of those institutions sort of mesh with one another. How do you find it in terms of bringing the conversation so that they're all able to not only talk to one another, but work with one another at the various levels?
Yeah, I think, Alabama has 14 HBCUs, most in any state. And they actually are really a big part of the civil rights movement. I mean, where do you find people that are willing to march, during a work week, and college students sort of sign up for that stuff just for the lunches. The end of In Loco Parentis actually came from a protest in Alabama State where the students protested some violence or something with the police. They did a march downtown Montgomery, and they went back to Alabama State, and they were expelled from college. And the courts ruled that you can't expel somebody from college for exercising their civil rights. So that organization itself made a big difference. And then, the leaders of Tuskegee were very involved in a lot of the changes that happened when Gandhi was trying to get India to be independent, visited them about nonviolence. So a lot of those type initiatives became really the practice for a lot of those campuses. The marches in Birmingham when Martin Luther King was arrested and spent some time in jail there was students groups in that community protesting particular things. So I think they in some ways are the heart and soul of how Alabama has progressed and made progress in the civil rights movement. Certainly our museums help us to sort of reflect on, all the bad stuff that happened, but it's also a moment of celebration for all the good stuff and the good character that you saw happen in the state at the same time.
It seems to me, too, that when we talk about, especially as we look at DEI, that there is an opportunity here for us to sort of progress and have some deeper conversations around what is it that we're trying to create with regard to equity and inclusiveness of all of our people. And I know that at part of the conversation is we're not trying to be discriminatory about it. I know that none of us really want to the detriment of one group and stuff, promote another group. All right. And but it's hard to sort of get that piece of the conversation out, Pete.
It's about, how do you manifest sort of a general form of openness and kindness and dispel any quiet sense of arrogance that you might portray or superiority. And that's where I think the undoing of anything like DEI happens, is the way people start othering other people, but in the inverse way that we have come to know. And so it isn't about that. Now, that physicality is interesting.
Yes.
You take that and you translate it to the other elements of DEI. Beyond, accessibility for people who have their limits. When you look at that and you say, how do I do this for everybody, regardless of their origins, beliefs, whatever?
Right.
That is more a mental exercise. And that mental exercise, I think, comes from a couple of things. Number one, as Jim pointed out rightly, when you consider the education, the schools of higher learning, et cetera, and the two things that they support, be it optional or otherwise, I think one is L&R, logic and rhetoric, to be able to single out what is just pure biased rhetoric from good, solid, logical arguments about things that can be very abstract. And that's a learning process.
Right.
To learn how to discriminate detail and accuracy and fact. Then the second one is, again, what Jim was pointing out. How do we have an open discussion? How do we help students engage with each other? Because in that learning, in that cauldron, that boiling pot of agreement and disagreement is where you get to hopefully some consensus. But finally, You know where you are in the world, and where you want to be in the world is the thing that comes after that. And that silent reflection of what happened, and the learning and the absorbing of all of these conversations that you have. And you come out of school as a more discriminating person, as a wiser, and there's the key, wisdom. How do we get, how do we ratchet up both a mix of kindness and wisdom?
But isn't the suppression of, for example, I have always believed that the suppression of information,
Oh, yeah.
of truth, of accurate history, that suppression.
I think those are called facts.
Well, yes, and how you apply those is part of what it is that we're trying to teach at every level, isn't it? Isn't that part of what critical thinking is all about?
Certainly that's something you want to encourage. That gets back to the Jeffersonian notion. An educated public is the best defense of democracy.
Yes.
I think the big thing is, sort of like transactional analysis.
Yeah.
And it really talks about going parent to parent. You can never win an argument with a parent because it's their way or the highway. And that's sort of where we've gone. And we have to start having these adult to adult conversations. And we have to get people there. And then, we almost have to say, well, let's talk adult about this.
Yeah.
Or whatever the easy ways to use transactional analysis. Because once you get to that, then you do get this calming effect, and you can actually talk about the things that are a part of it. In the South, we are hypersensitive to some ways for a lot of these things because a lot of the bad things happen there or continued at a longer time in the South. And the big thing is just don't say something where you're blaming the existing population, for the sins of their fathers. I think that we who came from those fathers would admit that there were bad things that were done, and we're willing to accommodate and fix those things.
Right.
We just don't want you to talk about our mama. And I think that's to me, that's the difference. We almost have to make sure that we understand that there are triggers out there that cause the flames to really flame up.
And, I've also personally observed that there are times when we have to distinguish between the institutions and they're setting up rules, regulations, and laws that in some instances may still exist. And that's what I'm being critical of. It's not your forefathers. It's the fact that, wait a minute, this particular piece is still on the books. I think that there is a need for us to have our critical thinking glasses on a lot more than what we put them on, and to sort of lower our sensitivities to the history that is there. It happened. This law was passed, but now how can we, or even should we, refer back to this, or should we say, hey, legislature, go please clean that up? Because that is ancient. That is not the intent of the people or the way we want to live today. And I think that's where we miss a lot around the idea of both sort of the criticism of things that may have happened. And there's another part that sort of comes to mind, which is that, and Jim, I know you and I have had this discussion, it's not just the South.
Right.
There have been, for example, there is a great example that recently was honored here in Massachusetts, which was the legal end of slavery in Massachusetts. And it happened through a court case. And it happened by a woman who was a slave, who then ended up in a place where, wait a minute, the law now protects me. And she said, oh, you know what? I'm got to go to court because I think I'm a free person. The court agreed. Well, you know what? Where you are right now. And they just built a monument, I think, someplace down in southern, south central Massachusetts to honor that particular piece. Well, the key here is that, well, there was slavery in Massachusetts. The housing discrimination. There was housing discrimination in California.
Massachusetts in those days was in fact a great center of slave distribution.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. Because we had a seaport.
that's right.
It is important for us, I think, that as we look, we are not, as a country, again, trying to separate or to accentuate one group over another. But I think the history of what we as a country have done is important to the future of where we're going and how we get there.
Right.
So
I'll
it's
say one of the things that we had discovered when you actually look at the slave history in Alabama and actually in the whole South is the volume of slaves in a particular county is basically highly correlated to current poverty in the South. And it just really shows you how important public policy is.
Yes.
Because some of these things are not fixable in a generation or even several generations. And then, when the federal government tried to fix some of this in the 30s, when we had the Great Depression and everybody was hungry and they were striking for jobs and everything, the one thing that they wouldn't fix is the issue of low wages for farm workers because we needed the cheap crops.
Right.
So, in the 1930s, we fixed pretty much the labor issues in the cities. But to do that, we had to sacrifice the same poor people that, were given an opportunity to become citizens after the war of the Civil War. Down south, they call it the War of Northern Aggression. It just shows you how those policies from years and years ago actually build upon each other. And it really wasn't until the 1950s that agriculture workers actually had access to Social Security and any protections for wages.
And that's the part, I guess, that I, as an academic, am just so interested in, which is to know the history, is to know where some of our problems are today and the policies that we need in order to be able to sort of move forward. Cheap labor on farms. I think you bring up a very interesting point and very salient point, Jim, which is that now when you look at California and other places where agriculture is king, the wages and the conditions under which those people work are actually extremely historic.
Yes.
They've been there generation after generation. The populations in some instances have changed, but the conditions under which they work have not.
Admittedly, sometimes the pain by degree is self-inflicted. Not everyone makes optimal choices all their lives, and so I'm not sure how you mitigate that. But, Jim brought up another interesting point as well with respect to describing what the situation, in terms of the density of the slave population versus, what you've done, what you've unmasked is interesting because I'm a believer that every issue, every problem has an interesting landscape. I refer to it as a landscape of details that, require a lot of analysis, a lot of survey work, understanding. But when you can actually frame the landscape, both over time and distance, geography, et cetera, that sort of research, that's what it is, really gets you to a higher order understanding of, okay, I've unmasked something that's a key that can potentially contribute to unlocking the problem. But those things can elude us for a long time unless we're prepared to really drill down, with, a balanced view, without a bias, without trying to create an answer that we want. The answer is whatever the answer is. But I found that statistic, by the way, quite fascinating.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And Dr. Purcell, we want to thank you and the graces of your office for being with us today, for the insight, and also I think the revelation that maybe there needs to be, and I understand your environment and how you're trying to sort of walk a very fine line to keep things cohesive in Alabama, but I will tell you, I think that there is a need for the Alabama story, especially some of the things you've been able to do in terms of helping bring institutions and people together for these conversations, should be applauded in a broader scale. But thank you again for sharing it, at least with our little small community here in Franklin today.
It was a great conversation. I enjoyed it
Absolutely.
very, very much. I'd also add,
Thank you,
by the
Peter.
way, that when you were talking about students and the students who leave and how do you get them to return, I would add one more RE word: return and reshape Alabama's future
Yes.
to contribute to the work that you're doing. I think that would be a noble calling.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, sir. Again, we hope to hear from Alabama again in the future. We're going to invite you back to our program for some other topics. I know one of the topics that we would like to explore much more deeply is this workforce development piece. I know we have one of our roundtable members who has been quite instrumental in helping our governor, because my understanding is we've got a $10 million pot that's devoted to workforce development here in Massachusetts. And I think you may have some examples of how we can better utilize those funds by modeling after some of the things you've done there in Alabama. So again, thank you very much, sir.
I would just say thank you. It was great. Certainly, it's the economy is what it's all about in some ways. So it is the central thing that people can talk green, and maybe a lot of the solutions that we talked about today can be addressed through just greater prosperity.
Okay. All right. You're very much appreciated, sir.
Thank you.
I think we've done it.
I think so. As we sort of say goodbye to Dr. Purcell, let me pursue another little avenue with you that has caused some tension in my life.
Tension.
Oh, absolutely, Peter. Last week, there was a small little report out of California. There was a family in a car.
Right.
And the family was apparently without any kind of forewarning, surrounded by masked men with guns.
Not a good day.
Who had come out of an unmarked van, banging on their windows, telling them to lower their windows. And the father who was driving was deathly afraid because he did not know one of the vests had police on it.
Right.
But in these days and times, folks, just because you have a vest that has police doesn't mean that you're police, especially most police that I know don't wear masks.
Right.
And are armed with M16s. The father, in his fright and fear for his life, took off.
After the window was smashed.
After the window of the car was smashed.
And they reached in and tried to grab him.
And when the father took off, the armed, whoever they were, opened fire.
Right.
Fortunately, no one was killed. However, the agents said that two of their agents were threatened or injured by the car running over them. The father went home, got the family in the house, called the police. The police came. The agency, whoever they were, and I think they identified themselves as the Customs and Border Patrol and one other agency. They also came. They confronted the family. And at the end, now here's the real, I think, troubling aspect of this. In the end, No one was arrested.
Right.
No charges were filed.
There was no warrant.
There was no warrant. And the issue of why the family was stopped is still not made public to this day.
Because there was no issue.
At some point in time, and the local police apparently said, because they came and identified themselves,
Sure.
said that this was outside of, it was in their jurisdiction, but the agency that had sort of caused the ruckus was outside any purview that they could do anything about.
Right.
And therefore, the whole thing was just basically, okay, everybody go back to your respective corners. And at this point, I wouldn't say no harm, no foul, because there's, again, the potential that someone could have been killed.
And the real harm that the car was damaged.
And the car
bullet
was
holes, the whole bit.
bullet holes, etc.
And then the psychological damage that you can't go down the street without being stopped and accosted.
Peter, my fear is that at some point in time, this is going to escalate and someone is going to either be injured or there may be a fatality.
We're watching our quota system take on its worst.
Well, let's talk about, as we close up, Washington, D.C.
Yeah, exactly. Returning back to DEI, I think on the thing I'll leave it on hopefully an up note.
Okay.
Looking at the First Amendment, there is this notion of, it refers to religious tolerance and the tolerance of ideas and so on. I'm going to put it out there for everyone to consider that I read tolerance as a weak word.
Weak in what way?
Well, it's like the way we tolerate the side effects of a drug. In other words, we're sort of getting by and we're putting up with it and we're suffering the consequences of having to deal with it.
Okay.
If you move instead from religious tolerance and idea tolerance to idea celebration.
Okay.
In other words, the thing that is different from me is worth knowing and worth enjoying.
Okay.
Think about that. If you could know and enjoy all the things in this world that are not like you, that's a great life.
Now, it's interesting that you should look at tolerance as a weak word, while I look at tolerance as a strong word. For example, tolerance is, and it could come from work that I've done in my father, who was a metallurgist, tool and die maker. And when he would talk about tolerance, it really was, how far can this thing go
Before it breaks.
before it breaks?
Absolutely. Work hardened, whatever.
Okay.
Yep.
And so tolerance then, if I am a person of tolerance, now, in my perception, tolerance is, what does it take for me to get to a point where I break? And I hope that my tolerance is high.
Yes. Right,
Okay?
exactly.
So it's interesting that, yes, there's the potential that tolerance, because you do get to that point where tolerance breaks, and it is about weakness.
Right. And so is there a magic word that we might figure out in the future, somewhere between tolerance and celebration?
And celebration.
Right. Time to get out the thesaurus. And on that note, I think we say goodbye. Thanks
on
for
that
joining
note,
us.
yes.
I'm Peter J. Thanks for being with us here on More Perfect Union with Dr. Michael Walker-Jones, our host. Great job.
Thank you, Peter, again for being with us. Thank you all, and hope to see you again on our next episode.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors. Good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV.
and thanks for watching.